This second Tuesday event is on measuring gloss. And we're going to talk about measuring gloss, and then we're going to show measuring gloss with a number of examples. Different papers with very different levels of gloss, textiles, lamination, even BOP type material. And of course, even printed on CRB, because even this Ritz box, if you look at the sheen, there's a certain amount of gloss related to this package. And if it doesn't have the right amount of gloss, it's not going to have the right appearance. So gloss is a often overlooked metric related to color and appearance that we have now built the ability to track and trend and fix if your gloss is not at the right level. So as usual, I'm going to go through a slide presentation. And then we're going to get into the actual demonstration of how this works. So let's go ahead and share my screen and go into my presentation. Feel free to use the chat function to ask questions as we go. And just one note about next month's second Tuesday. Next month's second Tuesday is actually during Printing United, which is really the biggest trade show in our industry. And stay tuned in terms of how we're going to handle that, because I don't know if we're going to do pre-recorded on the second Tuesday, but I'm not going to be really available to moderate it. So we might push it maybe to the following week. So just be aware of that. Next month's second Tuesday might not be a second Tuesday. So gloss meter. So why measure gloss? Because when we talk about visual appearance, it's color and gloss and potential special effects, which can also have gloss related to it. So gloss is definitely a key aspect of visual appearance. We need to control it by measuring it and tracking it. The surface property of an object, what gloss does measure is the surface property of an object involving reflection. And what a gloss meter does is it allows us to quantify the ability of materials, the material surface, to reflect gloss. And gloss follows the law of reflection, meaning the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. And gloss is all about making objects appear shiny. It's that sheen that we see when we look at an object. So in the light here, you see the shininess of this. If this were matte with no gloss, you wouldn't see the sheen. It would look flat, much like a matte paint. Kind of like this object. When you look at this object, there's no gloss to it. It's a matte object. There's no sheen to it. So gloss is all about the level of shininess in an object. And when we're printing on plastic, ceramics, metal, coatings, laminations, all of these attributes affect the gloss and therefore affect the appearance. And we document this level of shiny, if you will, not very scientific, I know, but it's easy for the common person to understand. It's the level of shiny, and it's measured in what's called gloss units. And as we look at gloss usage, it's a very quick way to assess the surface characteristics of a product. And the product can be a print product. It can be an actual physical product, like my MacBook has a certain amount of gloss in the aluminum casing on it. We can measure that, and anyone in manufacturing that cares to have a commonality between products, you need to make sure gloss is one of those variables that you're tracking. Now, factors that affect gloss is the substrate. So for instance, one of my examples that we're going to show in the demo portion is two laminated prints. One, they're both the same type of lamination, but they're on different types of paper. Well, the different level of gloss of the paper, even though it's laminated, does affect the level of gloss that you see in the end result, because it's a cumulative effect of the lamination plus the substrate, which is similar to putting coatings on a press. If you're putting an aqueous coating on a press, that's adding gloss to the press. And if you take a press sheet like this one, you can quickly see where the gloss is applied and where it isn't at the top here. If I hold it to the sheen right, you can see the coating, the aqueous coating on that press is causing a gloss effect. And there's different types of coatings which affect the gloss. So these are things that should be tracked. The thickness and quality of the coating and the polishing all affect the level of gloss. And if the product surface is wrong, the product is wrong. So gloss increases a product's attractiveness as much as color. There's been scientific research showing that the more glossy a product, typically the more someone will be attracted to that product on a shelf. It's as much as the vibrant color of the product. So this is why gloss gets a lot of play when it comes to product packaging, because it does cost more to make a product glossy, but it definitely attracts a consumer's eye. Now, what do we need to measure gloss? We need a light source in the gloss meter. We need a detector which is opposite of the reflection, and this deflector can be at different angles, and it depends upon the surface characteristics. So here I show 3 different types of surface characteristics: a matte, a glossy, and a regular. And all of these will essentially reflect the gloss at different angles based on the amount of gloss in the object. And this is where gloss gets a little technical, but hopefully this presentation will help simplify it so you know how to measure gloss. How does a gloss meter work? It measures the specular reflection of an object's surface. And the whole principle is light reflection. So at a specified angle of incidence, the beam, which is reflected back up, is captured through a lens and a receiver to tell us what that gloss is. Now, key thing about gloss meters here is when we're measuring color, we typically want to measure it on an ISO white backer. When we're measuring gloss, we typically want to measure it on an ISO black backer. And for this reason, oftentimes like an I1 comes with a white backer, but it doesn't come with a black backer. So we make this fabulous 11 by 17, pretty much indestructible, ISO compliant white and black backer. It's typically $129. We're going to offer it for $99 through the end of the show, Printing United, which is in about 30 days from now. Because we believe this, you'll see as I measure this, as I use this in the demo, this is a real important variable that you want to track when measuring gloss. Now, the gloss angle. Depending on the material characteristic, the light shines on the material with low gloss, more light is absorbed, so less reflection happens. Whereas high gloss, a high degree of the light is reflected into the sensor. So because of this nature and the law of light reflection, there's different angles that work better for different types of objects. And so common gloss angles that you'll see in the industry are 20 degrees, 45, 60, 75, and 85 degrees. So depending upon what you're trying to measure the gloss from, you typically need to purchase a different gloss meter. Now, us in the print industry, we print on all sorts of materials. So ideally, when we did the research on what gloss meter we were going to support, number one, we had to ensure that gloss meter was very accurate and consistent. Number two, we wanted the flexibility of the gloss meter to be able to handle multiple angles. So we'll talk about those multiple angles here. So here's the common angles for a multi-angle gloss meter, which is, by the way, hint, hint, supported in the gloss meter that capture, our ChromaChecker capture directly supports. So we can receive 20 degree, 60 degree, and 85 degree angles from this gloss meter, which means It's capable of measuring a wide variety of materials. So going back to the fact that when the light shines on the material with low gloss, most of that light is absorbed, so the specular reflection is weak, which means you typically want a higher degree angle, which is 85 degrees. And in sense, it's actually defined as a lower degree, even though the number's higher. The angle of reflection is what we're measuring. So it's actually 85 is a lower degree angle. And that's what we want to use with low gloss objects, like matte objects, objects that don't have much gloss. Whereas a 60 degree is what we want to use for a medium gloss sample. And then for high gloss material, we really need to use a 20 degree angle. And that's why manufacturers have different gloss meters for different types of measurements. So one gloss meter to measure ceramic tiles, another gloss meter to measure paint, another gloss meter to measure lamination and coatings. Well, by having a multi-angle gloss meter and knowing how to use the angles for the type of material you're measuring, you only need one gloss meter. You don't need multiple, okay? Especially since most of you probably don't have a gloss meter. You're not used to measuring gloss. This might be new to you. Starting out with a multi-angle gloss meter makes it very efficient for you to start using gloss in your process control. So, simple rule. When measuring gloss, look at the 60 degree angle first. And if the 60 degree angle, and by the way, this is a general rule. When you look online, you'll see different companies say different things. Some companies say less than 10 gloss units. Some say less than 20 gloss units. So I kind of say, hey, less than 15 gloss units, then use the low angle, which is the 85 degrees. If at the 60 degree angle, the gloss unit is between 15 and 75, then use the medium angle, which is the 60 degree angle in the multi-angle gloss meter. If it's more than 75 gloss units, then use the high gloss value, the high angle at the 20 degrees. So you'll see this applied as I start measuring the samples that I have here to give you an idea of how this works. And in terms of ISO standards, there's ISO standards for measuring different types of materials. Actually, a couple of our customers print on metal. And metal has an ISO standard which determines the level of gloss required for printing on metal. I don't have that ISO standard listed here. I actually have it listed in our reference section at the end. But you see, many of these standards listed here, some are for ceramic, some are for wood, some are for paper. So depending upon the ISO standard, they specify what the gloss angle should be. And you can see in many cases, one of the three standard angles is sufficient for most of these standards, okay? And when we talk about manufacturers making multiple gloss meters, you see there's one manufacturer that makes gloss meters for each of these applications. Well, when you have a multi-angle gloss meter, the multi-angle covers every one of these applications except automotive. And luckily, most of our customers don't have to measure automotive paints, but they do have to measure metal or coatings or furniture, paper, or paint. And our triple angle gloss meter will work for all of these materials. And this is what it looks like. So here's it in real life. You can see the manufacturer has a color issue with their simulation of the actual gloss meter, which I did not take the time to correct. But you can see it's very portable, very easy to use in terms of your usage. And we're calling it the CC380 gloss meter, which is a 3-angle gloss meter. And for a limited time, through the end of Printing United, we're offering an intro price on this at $5.99. I've actually had a number of vendors saying, I need to buy one of those. I can't believe you're offering it for less than $1,500, because if you look at the big iron companies out there that sell gloss meters, the 3-angle gloss meter is typically significantly more than $599. We're doing this because we want to exploit the application of gloss with our customers. We want our customers to be able to take advantage of this capability and show how measuring gloss will improve your ability to do process control. Here's some specific product information that, again, you can freeze this slide if you want to look at more details on this. Here's some of the technical details on this instrument. Again, I'm not gonna, we have a web page on our site that goes through this if you want this in more detail, or quickly take a screenshot before I go to the references related to gloss meters. And here's some different references to our manual related to measuring gloss in different scenarios. The ISO 12647-9 2021 is for actually metal decoration that I referred to. Another thing you want to be clear of is, I'll tell you, in the gloss meter calibration, there's a black shiny, it's almost like an iPhone screen when it's turned off. And you want to make sure you use a microfiber cloth to clean it and make sure it's clean. And just earlier today, I looked at it and there's a big old thumbprint on there, and it had to have been mine. And I'm very cautious not to touch it, and yet somehow I touched it along the way. So you want to make sure it's nice and clean, and then you store the instrument in that holder. So the benefits of using a gloss meter are to track the shininess of any type of material you're manufacturing, whether you're physically making a product or you're physically printing on a product. Tracking the gloss measure of that final result is key to ensure quality manufacturing. And if you start educating your salespeople that, hey, you guys are actually not only measuring color, but you're measuring gloss, that'll differentiate your company to your competitors. And you can start marketing that, hey, we're not only looking at color, we're looking at gloss. Are the other guys you're looking at doing printing for, are they measuring gloss? So it really highlights your company's commitment to quality. And remember, you can't control what you don't measure. So measuring gloss is a key aspect to this. So as we get into demonstrating the gloss meter in ChromaChecker Capture, think of it as a secondary tool. So it works with any existing measurement device you have. So if you're connected to an Exact or a Nix or a spherical spectro or an IO, this connects at the same time. So the concept is you can measure the color, store the color value, then measure the gloss, and it stores the gloss with that color value. And you can track it as part of Color Inspector or Substrate Inspector to ensure that not only the color is always right, but the gloss is always right. So with that, let's go ahead and exit my presentation, and I'm going to go into ChromaChecker Capture. Now, since I don't think any of you have a gloss meter yet, this is using a beta version of Capture. So your existing version of Capture will not support this today, but once you get the gloss meter, we can make the beta available to you so you can see exactly how it works. So I'm normally logging into my Capture software, and I've got my Capture to bring me into the Quick Checker tool, which is next to the Print Inspector tool. And then if you look at the bottom of the screen here, there's an icon. And the icon is gloss meter is not connected. Now, what I want to do on the gloss meter, if you take a look at the screen on the gloss meter, is I'm going to click on the USB connection. And I do that by clicking on the arrows to get to the USB connection. And then I click on this icon and I say connect. And now ChromaChecker Capture is connecting to the gloss meter, and you just heard it beep, hopefully. And now it's connected to the gloss meter at the same time that it's connected to my i1 Pro 3. And you see the icon is green. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is say calibration. So I'm clicking on calibration and making sure the instrument is in the cradle. It's actually calibrating itself. You might have heard the beep there. And now it's ready to go. Now, to see how good the calibration is, I'm just going to measure a color. I'm just going to measure a color just to start things moving. So with my I1, I'm measuring a color. It comes up as red violet, or I'm measuring the Ritz box and it's coming up as a signal red. And now I'm going to click the button on the instrument to measure the calibration plaque on the inside here. And up it comes showing me the 20-degree angle is 90.31. Now, on the calibration plaque itself, it has the numbers. So at 20 degrees, it says it's 90.3. Can you see that? If I get the sheen so it's right. So the actual measurement said it's 90.31, rounded to the 10th, to 20 degree is 90.3. So it's dead on. The 60 degree says it's 94.13. Here it should be 94.1. So again, within 3/100ths, dead on. The 85 degree says it should be 99.6. We're at 99.54. So within, again, 6/100ths of what the calibration plaque says. So that tells me I didn't have any fingerprints on it. It's a very accurate instrument to what the standard is. It's matching what it's supposed to match. This means if you have 10 gloss meters in the field, the 10 gloss meters are going to measure to one another very precisely in terms of this make and model, hence us choosing this make and model. So now let's start playing with gloss. So let's start with the Ritz box here. So I had the Ritz box, and I'm just going to go ahead and now use the gloss meter. And if you take a look, the aperture of the gloss meter is pretty long, because depending upon the angle of the light, like at an 85-degree angle, it's the light starting here, angle of incidence back up, so it needs a long distance to measure. And you've got arrows here, so when I put it on the Ritz box, I can put it in an area where it's, let's say, just red. And when I click on that red area of the Ritz box, you'll see it comes up and it shows me that the 60-degree angle, and by the way, it does say 65. That's a bug that's going to be fixed quick. It's 60-degree angle is a 38.9. So what did our frame of reference say? So if we're at the 60-degree angle, if we're between 15 and 75, then we should use the 60-degree angle to measure the color, or measure, excuse me, the gloss. And we can document that this Ritz box should be about a 39 gloss units at the 60-degree angle. Now let's take another Ritz box. So this is the first Ritz box. This is a Ritz box made by another manufacturer, another printer. And I'm going to put the instrument on here, and I'm going to measure again. So remember, really 39 is the gloss unit. And this new box comes up, and this new box says it's 30. Okay, look at that. There's 9 points of difference in gloss between these two Ritz packages. And you can see it. When I do the reflection in the light here, this one is shinier than this one, hence the higher gloss units. So in this way, this affects the appearance. Now, 9 points is maybe not that big a deal, but it may be, depending upon the person who's making the judgment. And frankly, I don't know if Ritz puts a gloss metric on their packaging, but I'm guessing they must have some sort of metric on here to ensure that the gloss level is correct. So here we go, showing different applications of gloss. Now let's go ahead and I've got a couple papers here, and for time's sake, I measured them ahead of time. So if you take a look, these two papers, one I've called glossy and one I called semi-matte. And what I'm going to do is compare the glossy with the semi-matte one using my scratch pad. So I got glossy on the top, I've got semi-matte on the bottom. So these two papers are 0.6 delta E from one another. But when you look at the sheen, they're completely different. This one's super glossy. This one's not so super glossy. In fact, I added a third paper in here that's only like 1.3 delta E off, and it's got a whole different look and feel due to the gloss. And so now, if I take my gloss meter and now with the paper, with the CRB, with the Ritz package, I didn't worry about measuring on the black because this is so thick, there's no transparency here. It's totally opaque. But now that I'm measuring the paper, which does have a certain amount of opacity, I'm using the black backer. And as I use the black backer and I take my gloss meter and I measure here on the glossy paper, you can see it comes up and it'll show me that the gloss is essentially 40 at the 60-degree angle. And that's the glossier paper. Now, when I go to the second paper, which is not as glossy, and I measure that, it comes up at a 19. So there's literally a 20 gloss unit difference between these two papers, even though they're 0.6 delta E of one another. That 20 units of gloss visually to the eye is almost always unacceptable. And not to let too much go here, but we're looking at having a way to quantify how much gloss is too much or how much is good enough. So much like what we did with E factor, where we quantify how much color difference is too much color difference, we're looking at having some research to do this with gloss. So we start capturing what the industry's acceptance is in terms of a gloss match. So that's very exciting. Now I'm going to measure this third paper, which has a different level of gloss. And as I measure this, remember the very glossy paper was 39. The semi-gloss was 19. This paper's 20. So this paper's gloss unit is actually pretty close to this paper's gloss unit. And when you look at them in the sheen, looking at the shininess, even though they're two totally different papers, yeah, the sheen is very similar. The sheen is very similar. And that's what we want, is a similar sheen. So in this way, you can look at the sheen of your paper. And when you're using our substrate match within ChromaChecker, meaning to make two printers match one another, let's just go take a look at that. A lot of you might not know this. So I'm going to go into our ChromaChecker cloud. And within our ChromaChecker cloud, I'm going to go into our print inspector. And I'm going to compare my Epson with my color press. And we're going to say compare tracks. And when I compare tracks, it's looking at the visual difference between the two prints. And it shows me it's a 4.8 E factor. So even though the Epson, as I zoom in here, the green dot represents Grackle, the purple dot represents that the Epson is 1.7 E factor from Grackle. So it's really close. To be G7 color space compliant, you need the metric called the 95th percentile delta E, and that's what we call E factor, to be within 3 for the proofing. Well, this Epson is within 1.7, so that's fantastic. Now, the color press, to be G7 color space, you need the 95th percentile delta E, or the E factor, to be within 5. So this color press is actually within G7 color space compliance, but to one another, the visual difference is 4.8. And through our scientific research that we've published, 50% of customers will not accept a 4.8 visual difference. So that's a problem. So we need to normalize or somehow get these closer. And by the way, this is something that G7 and ID Alliance hasn't tried to tackle at all. We've gone and we're leading the industry in terms of how to tackle these issues of how to make printers match one another. And we do it via E factor. And here we're saying, hey, the difference between the substrates is 4.8. remember, substrate's the 5th color in 4-color printing. If the substrate delta E is 4.8, there's no doubt that the visual difference between the two prints is more than 4.8, or in this case, 4.8 exactly. So if we can get the substrate for one, either the Epson to match the color press or the color press to match the Epson, ideally we'd use the same substrate, which we can't because you can't run the same paper on an Epson as a color press. So you have to find a color match. We have this tool called color match, best match function within Substrate Inspector, which doesn't just look at delta E. It looks at a number of metrics to define how our human eye see color, and gloss is one of these metrics. So you can find a paper that visually matches either to the Epson or the color press, load that in the Epson or color press, and this 4.8 will come down significantly. If you get a color match of an E factor of less than, let's say, 2, that 4.8, I guarantee you, will go down to less than half. It'll go down to less than 2.4. And again, based on our scientific research, we can tell you that virtually all print buyers accept a color difference of less than 3. So this is a key part of how ChromaChecker can help you dial your printing devices into one another based on color and gloss to get a better match. So let's hold the conversation on substrate for a second. Although, you know, it's so easy just to go into Substrate Inspector and show you the match feature. So in the match feature, if I'm dealing with this DW62, which is a mid-states paper, if I go into match and I say I want to match an M1 condition and I'm using it for digital type printing, and I look in the public library and I find the best match, ChromaChecker goes out into our public library of hundreds of samples, and then it'll come back with what it feels is the best match for this scenario. And then I can look at the metrics to see how good that match is. So it's a very powerful capability within ChromaChecker that helps us quantify how close different papers are to our given reference. So now with that, let's go ahead and go back to my substrate, and we'll come back to Substrate Inspector. We're going to go into Capture now, and we just showed how important measuring substrate is in paper. I'm going to end today's presentation showing how we can make a project. We have a new tool called Project Inspector that we've been slowly launching. It's kind of a soft launch. We might be sharing some more information about Project Inspector next month, because the idea of Project Inspector is that I could track the Ritz blue, yellow, red. I can track the printed white. I can track the base CRB, what do you want to call that, gray. And I can track the gloss all through Project Inspector and publish this Project Inspector out to anyone who's printing the Ritz carton. And then as they measure the color for the different attributes and the gloss, it gives them an overall pass or fail that all the metrics that you've asked them to meet are passing. And if you, being the publisher of this project, change any of these metrics in the future, even though you might have 100 different printers printing this Ritz project, it automatically updates the metrics. So it gives them an email warning first, but then it updates the metrics telling them, everyone, hey, new metrics here, so next time you measure, it might be a little different. So it's a fabulous way to communicate color and appearance through color values and gloss values to ensure that your color is right. So little keynote about Project Inspector, and we're going to end on how we can set a project up for tracking the substrate over time. Because I can't tell you how many of our customers have told us ChromaChecker saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars because the substrate that they got from their manufacturer wasn't meeting the manufacturer's criteria. In fact, recently we had one of our biggest customers tell us that they got substrate from a manufacturer that didn't have the normal OBAs, the optical brighteners in them. And ChromaChecker found it right away when they were like, well, why is the color not right? And they looked at it, and the color distribution with and without the OBA showed the blue axis just completely jumped, of course. And by the way, now that we know that, we're putting that into logic, so you don't have to necessarily understand color. If you measure a substrate and you're checking it and we see it jump like that, our goal is we're going to put up a message to the operator saying, hey, this substrate looks like it's missing the optical brighteners that are normally in this substrate. So immediately you can stop the press, call up whoever you're getting the paper from and saying, hey guys, what are you doing to me? You're wrecking me because my paper has to be right. So these are ways that ChromaChecker has saved our customers hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to show measuring ceramic. So, hopefully ChromaChecker has an instrument inspector tool which tracks every instrument to ensure that it's measuring consistently week to week, month to month, year to year. And it eliminates, if you measure your instrument over a course of the month, we'll make an ISO report showing the ISO auditor that you don't have to send the instrument back to the factory because it's right. It hasn't changed. And we make the color inspector target in a couple different forms. This is one easily in my hand, which is listed in the ISO 23032 2020 standard for spectrophotometer instruments. But we also worked with Lucidian, who makes the BCRA tiles, which is the only other company listed in this ISO standard for being able to track an instrument. But Lucidian worked with us to do a ceramic version of our instrument target. And part of the tool here, we have a couple different versions, both from Lucidian. And if you look at this plastic, hopefully you can see this one is an earlier version, but it's a lot more shiny than this version. So let's go ahead and put this on the gloss meter, and I'm going to measure the shiny version first. And up on the screen comes 79, 88, and 97. Okay, guys, 88 at the 60 degree. Let's just reflect back on our presentation. If it's over 75, then we probably should be looking at the high angle, the 20 degree, to do our assessment. So with this type of material, we should be looking at the 20% as our process control metric, which is reading as a 79, to ensure consistency. Now, I'm going to measure the secondary plaque here, and I'm measuring this. So remember, the 65 was 88, and on this secondary one, the 65 is 81. So again, it's more than 75. So then we looked at the secondary variable, which is the 20 degree, and the 20 degree on this one's 58. But if you remember, the 20 degree on the other one, let's just go back and measure it again to make sure it is what we say it is. So this one's a 58, and this one is a 77. So a good 20 points difference between the gloss on these two materials. And again, visually, we can see it. If these are supposed to match one another, they don't match. And by the way, when you're measuring material like this, or in a second I'll be doing the lamination material, you want to make sure that you remove all smudges. So using microfiber and something non-harmful, you just want to make sure that the area that you're measuring doesn't have any fingerprints or discolorations in it, because that will affect the gloss reading. Okay, so you see how this is being used in practice in terms of which angle to use in which case. Now let's go ahead and do the lamination, because everyone's seen situations where lamination is not lamination. You laminate with one type of laminate and you do another one, and they visually don't match one another. So let's just take a look at these two laminates. And again, the first one is the press sheet that was laminated on a different paper. And as it comes up, we can see it's 59 at the 60. So it's a medium level laminate. And then the next one I'm going to measure, so it's a 59.34. The next one I'm measuring is coming up at 47. So 10 points of difference in terms of gloss units between the two laminates. And visually, you can look at the laminate, and you can definitely see that the first one I measured is a little more glossy than the second one. But is 10 too big a deal? I don't think so. I think for most people, 10 is going to be fine. But these are things that we should do some research on and really document it, because no one's done this in the industry yet. And so this is helpful to know as you're coming up with what's acceptable, what's waste, what isn't waste. That's what we're all about with ChromaChecker. Now let's do another sample. Let's do a BOP sample. So here's a BOP sample from a flexo press. And on the flexo press, you see the high degree of sheen on this material. There's really a high degree of sheen. And sometimes this BOP material is printed white, and sometimes it's actually manufactured to be this white. And so for our first step, let's just go ahead and measure on the BOP material. Move my ceramic tile here. Measure on the BOP material and see what the surface characteristic is. And as I measure it, you can see that it is at the 65%, it's up at 82%. What does that tell us? It tells us there's a high degree of gloss on this material. So for tracking purposes, we should be looking at the 20-degree angle and document the 13. And you'll see in a minute as I go in and I document this can be a printed white or it can be a native white. Doesn't matter. ChromaChecker tracks both a printed white and a native white. And it allows us to go in and actually track this as a metric for conformance, for making sure that it's correct. And for fun, let's go ahead and just build a report. You'll notice here on the report on the left side, I can include spectral data, fluorescence effect, color conversion, glossiness. Notice glossiness is new. So when I download this report, it's going to download it to you see it downloading here on the icon. And as I go to my desktop and I click on the report, you can see on the report, it's showing me the gloss value of this measurement. So at the 20, it's 13, at the 60, it's 82, and at the 85, it's 70.9, which is exactly what it's showing here. So ChromaChecker allows you to create physical printed reports for anything that you're measuring, which has all the values related to color and gloss as part of it. Beth, any questions come in? Just kind of on a roll. I'm not watching the chat, but I didn't see anything light up, so it doesn't look like questions have come in.
Yeah, so, I don't have any right now.
Okay, so guys, I'm hoping this is useful for you and you're learning something. What I want to do now is go into our project inspector. So I'm going to tease a bit with our project inspector. So we're going to go to the cloud as the administrator. And in the administrator, I'm going to go to my substrate inspector, which I'm in right now, and I'm in my DW62 substrate, which I'm going to track. And if I edit that, you'll see I have 4 levels of gloss here. Now, some of our customers are currently using a 75-degree gloss meter, which is what TAPI recommends. And so we have a place where you can enter that value. And then we have the 3 values for our 3-angle gloss meter. And this paper fell in that 15 to 75 range. So we only entered the gloss value at the 19 gloss unit measure for 60 degree. And then over here on the left, I can set a tolerance for what I'm allowing that 19 to be. I can set it for a 5 to start with, we'll say, and I'll go ahead and save it. And I'm not putting the other 2 angles in there because I don't really care. I'm really, because this falls into that sweet spot, I only really care about the 60-degree angle. So now my substrate is set. So now I'm going to go into my project inspector. And within my project inspector, I'm going to make a new project. And I'm going to call this new project Substrate SG for semi-gloss. And we're going to say add. And now I've got this substrate SG, and I'm going to add a substrate to it. So as I go into my substrates, you'll see my DW62 is listed on the list here. And I'm going to say, yes, that's the one. And for this project, I'm actually going to override the global tolerance, which was a 5 gloss unit. And I'm going to go in here and put in a 3 because this customer is more picky and I'm just covering myself with a 3. And notice for substrate now, we can set what's called a snowflake tolerance. And the concept of a snowflake tolerance is when we're dealing with certain colors of substrate, like metal or other types CRB. The delta E is a poor metric to use to quantify visual difference in different hue angles and lightness angles. Using the snowflake allows us to be essentially 6 times more precise than delta E to set a tolerance of plus minus L, A, and B so that visually it's acceptable in terms of the color. And this is called out in a number of ISO standards that they know delta E, even delta E 2000 doesn't work well for especially substrates as well as certain colors. And using the snowflake tolerancing, it fixes that, makes it much more visually aligned. The number is visually aligned to your expectations so you don't get false fails because the color might look right, but it's failing delta E because delta E is a poor metric to define things like paper color difference, paper visual difference. So I've got that set up now, and I'm going to go to my projects, and you'll see I've got my substrate project down here, and I'll go and take a look at it. And if I go to my assets, shows me the substrate. Did I add the substrate to it? I don't think I saved it. So let's go ahead and save it, use a custom tolerance, and we're going to put a 3 here, and we're going to save it. So now that's saved to my substrate project. And if I click here, it brings me directly to the substrate inspector, and it shows me my gloss at 60 degrees is 19 units. And it shows me that my tolerance is 3 because I overrode it in terms of the library. So now we're going to go ahead and go to my ChromaChecker capture. And this time I'm going to move from Scratchpad. I was in Scratchpad when I was doing comparisons between different measurements that I was doing. Now I'm going to change that Scratchpad to projects. And in my project list here, you'll see that I've got a project called Substrate SG. So now when I click on Substrate here, and I go ahead and I grab my I1 instrument, and I click my white backer here, and I click my substrate. Now this isn't the actual DW62 substrate, so the delta E might be a little high here, but it's showing the point of reference here. And you can see as I clicked on the substrate, it's showing me that the delta E is what, 5.4. But now when I measure with the gloss meter on this substrate, it comes up and it's showing me that the gloss is 19.57. And look in this area, I get the green check because the only metric I put for pass fail for the substrate was gloss. I could have put a delta E color on it. I could have put a delta L, delta A, delta B. I didn't do that yet. All I'm showing here is gloss. But I put gloss on it, and the gloss at 60 degrees is 20 units. I'm allowed 19 plus minus 3. So it's passing. It gives me a green check check saying, yes, it passes. And if I go in to build a report for this and download it, I can then go in and you see it's downloading the report. And when I go to my desktop in my capture folder where it saved this report, you can see this measurement was just made this minute. It's 5.4, and you see right here the gloss is 20 gloss units, which is within the ±3 tolerance, and that's why this is failing. So this is part of Project Inspector, which gives you a whole new way to track color and appearance across your entire manufacturing line, whether it's in one plant or in 1,000 plants around the world. So not only tracking color, but tracking gloss as a metric that requires to be assessed. And again, you see in the report here, you can simplify the report if you don't want to overload your customer. Maybe they just care about color and gloss. You can just deselect these checks and just make a report of just color and gloss, and you've got it. So that's a little tease on how Project Inspector makes it very easy to essentially publish your print requirements. And it's part of the PRX and PQX initiative that the industry has put forth as an ISO standard. So you can publish your print requirements exchange, including print, including gloss, which gloss is part of the PRX. I don't know of any other vendors supporting gloss as part of PRX and PQX, but we're doing it. I think we might be the first. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're the first. And in this way, with our supported gloss meter at a very low price point to get involved in, you can start doing these types of process control checking, which is critical for visual and appearance. So that concludes what I had on our agenda today. I hope you enjoyed what we've covered. It's kind of a new area for most people because people aren't used to dealing with gloss. Hopefully I made a very complicated subject simple because as printers, we're hit with having to print on a lot of different materials. And hopefully you can see the vision of us choosing a really high quality gloss meter to be able to accommodate all these types of materials, track them to the customer's expectations, and differentiate your company as a unique organization. FYI, please follow us on LinkedIn and look us up at Printing United. If you know us, you know we get very busy at shows like this. So please schedule meetings for us ahead of time so that we can be sure to be available when you're there. Because otherwise, I often have 5 people waiting to talk to me, and unfortunately, many times people give up on wanting to talk to me. But if you schedule a time, I will make sure that I work with you and cover your questions. And then our color conference is in final planning stages. It's going to be the last week of January in Florida again. So please mark that on your calendars. Printing United is not doing a color conference this year. So as far as I know, we're the only color conference happening. We're trying to make it more open so it's not just ChromaChecker centric, although the hands-on that everybody loves, we are going to do ChromaChecker type hands-on training, maybe some others, depending upon what we hear from our customers. But please put that on your calendar for the last week in January. Any questions come in, Beth? I saw something. Nope, still not. So, okay, guys.
Nope, still no questions.
Time, and hope to see you at Printing United, and if not there, at our color conference in January. So, thank you.